Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Andrew and welcome to another episode of My Open World. This series was meant to be more of a regular thing, but I may as well just make it something that I do annually at this stage. Today I'm going to be talking about some eye-catching games at E3 2018, the most important time of the year for anyone. There are exactly 60 games on this list, 53 of which were not on my previous list for previous E3s. And I'll be talking a little bit about these games, and I won't have enough time to go into full details, so if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. And if you have any games that you liked at this year's E3, you should let me know what they are in the comments below, regardless of whether they were part of my list or not. There will also be gameplay or trailer links to each game in the description as well. So let's start with probably the most anticipated game, period.
In 2077, they voted my city the worst place to live in America.
Cyberpunk 2077. I saw the title and I added this to my list before seeing any footage. I originally heard the announcement for this game around 2009, which means I've been waiting nearly 10 years to finally see some more information for this title. The trailer looked amazing and definitely has me more excited than before. This is going to be a first-person RPG, not an FPS, so I get the feeling it will be reminiscent of Deus Ex, and this has me excited even more. CD Projekt Red are good developers, I pronounced the name wrong there. They've proven themselves pretty well with The Witcher 3. I honestly don't know how much longer I can wait to get my hands on Cyberpunk 2077. Death Stranding. I loved the Metal Gear franchise from Solid Snake up to the Phantom Pain, so it was pretty inevitable that this would end up on my list as well. Hideo Kojima, the legendary designer, had a unique style that he applied to his art, something that actually made Metal Gear stand out and something that I really liked about the franchise. This is keeping in mind that Konami kind of had their reins on him. And this time around, we're getting a version of Hideo Kojima unleashed. We got to see more gameplay footage this time. It wasn't much to go by, but the game definitely looks good. It looks like it has a lot more of that Hideo Kojima charm, more so than Metal Gear did. And to be fair, it wouldn't truly be a Hideo Kojima game if it wasn't weird in some way. And to make matters better, Norman Reedus is portraying the main character, and even Mads Mikkelsen? I think I'm pronouncing that right, he's in the game as well, obviously voicing a character, and I can't wait to see this game in action. The Last of Us 2. This one was a no-brainer as well. I loved the first one a lot, arguably Naughty Dog's best game to date. And I say arguably because Uncharted 4 was an extremely good experience as well. Naughty Dog are very delicate with their work. They know their audience and grow their games with their audience. Crash was basically for the kids. Jak and Daxter was for the teens. Uncharted was for late teens and young adults. And now we've got The Last of Us, a game that heavily respects the more mature part of the gaming community. It's dark, it's gritty, and it displays the worst sides of humanity, and it isn't afraid to embrace its visceral side, so I didn't really need to see any gameplay for this to know that I'll like it. Either way, they showed us some gameplay footage at E3 and it looks fucking amazing. I don't really need to say more than that about this title. Doom Eternal. This one was also a given because I absolutely loved the first one, and if you watched my In the Mist episodes covering it, then you'd know why. I barely need to explain myself for this one. I once again saw the title, and just added it to the list before seeing any footage. Probably the most amusing trailer I saw all E3 was for Satisfactory, which is no surprise as the game is being developed by Coffee Stain Studios, the same developers of the hilariously silly and fun Goat Simulator. It looked like you can build an entire industrial mining city with full-blown train networks, and it's an FPS open-world factory building game. So by now, the title of the game should obviously stand out as a pun, and you play as an engineer on an alien planet as part of the Save the Day program, a program whose goal is to construct a massive machine for unknown reasons. Dying Light 2 was another title that ended up on my list pretty easily. I loved Dying Light 1 a lot, probably the best atmosphere in any game I've played, and probably the best zombie game and parkour game I've seen and played as well. This one takes place 15 years later after the events of the first one, so this kind of gives it room to make some significant changes to the game without completely rebooting it. This time around, your choices will actually affect the game world, and the choices look like they have both positives and negatives no matter what, which means you're always going to have to deal with some sort of consequence. Given how much I enjoyed the first one, I'm definitely going to be grabbing the second one. I'm even in the process of a second playthrough for the first one, but I'm playing it with a friend this time. Concrete Genie. Now, I think this one was originally announced in a PlayStation show last year. It grabbed my attention at the time, and I was happy to see it in this year's E3. I really liked the concept for this, and I like it even more after having seen the demo. The story revolves around a kid called Ash who has the ability to bring his paintings to life, and he has to use this ability to cleanse the streets and alleyways of the polluted and abandoned town of Denska. I liked the art style and the visuals, they looked really gorgeous, but what I liked the most was how it seems to integrate the PS4's controller technology into the way you interact with the game. In fact, it's pretty much a big part of it. Best way I can describe it, it's kind of like Tearaway meets Getting Up. Raji, an ancient epic. I think I pronounced that name wrong. Raji? Whatever. I've had the demo for this for a long time, and I've been wanting to showcase it for a long time, but as usual, I just didn't squeeze in the time for it. After playing the demo, it definitely showed some promise. It wasn't anything too special, but it kept me glued to the screen. It still needed to be polished up in a few areas here and there. Otherwise, it was nice to see a game set in an era that's not often, if at all, visited, and that's ancient India and its mythology. It revolves around a young girl who's been chosen by the gods to stand against a demonic invasion of the human realm. I haven't been into a fighting game since maybe Tekken 5, and I do have Dragon Ball Xenoverse 1 and 2, but as usual, I have yet to play them. And these are more open worldish, so I don't feel that they're 100% dedicated fighting games, which is why I took interest in them in the first place. Jump Force looks like more of a dedicated fighting game, and it looks fucking amazing. I love the look of the three-dimensional openness of the arena or the level that it puts you on, and it's not a side-scroller or side-view style fighting game, which is still very, very common in the fighting genre. The combat also looks amazing, it looks fluid, and more importantly, it looks fast. Visually, it looks stunning as well. I know it's a work in progress, but I'm loving the level of detail in the environments. I haven't actually been this interested in a dedicated fighting game for a good while. My Friend Pedro. This reminds me of those old school Flash games you used to find on Newgrounds when you were in high school during class. And that's not a bad thing though, because this looks great. The game not only looks really fluid, but it looks like it allows you to be fairly creative with the use of environmental objects. Like, you can kick a table over and use it as cover, or you can shoot a frying pan into the air, then shoot it to ricochet bullets off it. It looks really cool and unique. It has an interesting concept that I haven't really seen in the major gaming scene. The Wind Road. I actually had to do some digging around for this one. What I found was actually an intriguing Chinese martial arts game. You don't see many open world or RPG martial arts games around, or at least not released often in Western regions. I think the closest or most notable ones that I remember were Jade Empire and Absolver. But The Wind Road will integrate adventure elements with traditional RPG while trying to differ itself from ARPGs or action RPGs. And I watched some of a 30-minute video with a developer explaining the game. Naturally, me being extremely fluent in Mandarin, I completely understood everything they said, but for the sake of this video, I'll refrain from quoting anything I heard for now. Or forever. The game does look a bit janky from some of the footage I've seen, but the visuals and textures for the environment look pretty outdated as well. However, what caught my eye was the combat. It seems fast-paced and fluid. I like that the developers are also taking the initiative to try and gain the game traction in the West. The martial arts genre is rarely visited in games, or rarely steps outside its dedicated fighting boundaries, so despite what it might look like in alpha, I'm actually willing to give it a chance. At the very least, I'm going to track the game until it launches. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. I like Star Wars, but I'm not a giant fanatic or an absolute psychopath who has to petition a remake of The Last Jedi. I'm a little simpler than that when it comes to their games. As long as I can freely swing a lightsaber or force throw enemies off a cliff or force choke them in front of their comrades, I'm generally fine. I really liked the gameplay from The Force Unleashed 1 and 2, but the narrative was pretty crap. A new Star Wars game that isn't an FPS was bound to catch my eye quicker than a Star Wars game that was an FPS. The information for Fallen Order is extremely vague at the moment. In fact, it wasn't technically really announced at E3 on stage. It was just announced by a developer who seemed to be in the crowd. The website, however, only lists it as a brand new action-adventure game which tells an original Star Wars story, which means it's pretty much canon, or so I think that's what that means, and if so, I really like the idea of that. So it tells an original Star Wars story revolving around a surviving Padawan set shortly after the events of Episode 3. So that's not entirely much information, but I guess it's enough. I'm really hoping that the gameplay will be similar or better than The Force Unleashed. I don't want any of that KOTOR bullshit. The gameplay in that looks like crap. I don't give a fuck how good people say that game is. I tried it once, I'll never touch that shit again. I felt like the fluidity of The Force Unleashed allowed you to feel like a proper badass Sith or Jedi, but the concept of the story sounds a lot more interesting than The Force Unleashed. I don't mind if they allow either a custom character or a static character, just as long as it's someone new to the universe in some way. Naturally, as you could expect from me, I'm hoping that this will be an open world game.
Is this real?
Sea of Solitude. This one caught my eye pretty easily with its art style and aesthetics. The game revolves around the theme of loneliness. The idea is that when humans are lonely, they turn into monsters. The character you play as, Kay, has actually turned into a monster, and she's trying to figure out how to turn back into a human. It looks like it's going to be a scary type of game, which I think will complement the theme really well. Like the parts where these giant creatures seemingly attack you, or, jump out and try to eat you. It looked pretty interesting. But I like that they're not just making it about the gameplay, but trying to bring more awareness about this kind of theme.
Come now. All my blessings go with you.
Greedfall was also another title that was announced before E3 2018, but it's on my list because I like the setting for this one. It's an action RPG set in the 17th century with fantasy, magic, and monsters. It's set on an island paradise that's being conquered by the colonial forces, and you play as a human who's neutral in this war, and you can help different sides. The RPG mechanics let you pick your playstyle, so you can play as a mage or a melee type and so on. The gameplay they showed off looked pretty promising as well, so I'm eager to see more for this one.
Good morning, Vault 76.
Now, I haven't finished a Fallout game yet. I've played 3, I've played Vegas and 4, yet I haven't finished a single one of them. So it's a bit ironic that Fallout 76 would be one to catch my eye. The games are good, but I just can't put my finger on why I can't finish them. I got right near the end of Vegas and stopped playing it too. Fallout 76 is a prequel to all Fallout, so this actually intrigues me a lot. Building is also making a comeback, so I'm eager to see the improvements there. I like the idea of a co-op Fallout, but I don't like the idea of always online for something they suggest that you can play solo. After seeing more information on it, it kind of makes sense why they chose to do it this way. Instead of looking at Fallout 76 as a typical Fallout game, we should be looking at it as an MMO light, similar to Destiny. The game does have PvP, and they say that it has anti-griefing mechanics in place, but I don't like the idea of this at all. They explain that if you're killed, you can just move to a different area of the map or something like that, and I find that that's just like a shithouse and lazy solution on the developer's part. I would have preferred if they kept PvE and PvP separate so both sides can enjoy the game. The problem with the current method they've proposed is that people who enjoy PvP will pretty much always be having fun, but people who only enjoy PvE can have their experience soured by someone who likes PvP. So it seems to favor PvP more than PvE at the moment. It stays on my list because after all these years, they're bringing something different to the franchise. And I still find it interesting, despite the fact I probably won't play it unless I find enough friends who will. Outer Wilds. For this particular title, I only saw a very short gameplay video, which was about 30 seconds long. The simplistic yet detailed art style caught my eye. It said that you can explore a handcrafted solar system. Bam! Open world. I'm hooked. I liked how it showed you flying a spacecraft through some tornadoes. You also play as an alien race, not a human, to spice things up a bit. The game apparently takes place in a solar system that's stuck in a 20-minute time loop. So every 20 minutes, according to the demo shown, the sun will supernova and almost everything will reset. Halo Infinite. I've been enjoying the Halo franchise a lot, bar number 4, which pissed me off with some frustrating moments. It's my favorite Xbox exclusive, and Halo 1 was one of the very first FPS games I ever played growing up. Naturally, it's inevitable for this one to end up on my list as well. Not much is known about Infinite at the moment. The story is meant to center on Master Chief. What that means, I don't fully know. It might mean we get to see a lot more backstory for Master Chief, more than we've ever seen in any of the games before. Or the name also suggests a few things, like this Halo might be more open in a similar fashion to Halo 1, or possibly even open world. While I like open world games, I'm actually a bit skeptical on how they'd pull this off for a Halo title. It could also imply that the game might have a long lifespan, possibly via online, since they recently had Halo Online taken down. Or Halo Infinite might even have been the project that Microsoft was working on that was similar to Halo Online. Or it might be that they want to support the game longer both for single player and multiplayer. Despite the lack of information, it's the engine demo they showed off that makes this one an eye-catcher. The visual fidelity looks stunning. Whether it gets downgraded or not is yet to be seen, but even then, who gives a flying fuck? It's a new Halo title and I want to see some gameplay. This one is kind of a bit odd. That's probably a big reason it made it on my list, and this one is called Tunic. It's an action-adventure game about a tiny fox. It will allow you to explore the wilderness, spooky ruins, and fight creatures. I saw a 10-minute video for this one and was pretty hooked. I love the art style. It's simplistic and detailed enough for your eye's pleasure. At first, I was worried this was going to be turn-based, but the combat happens in real time, and the music they had sounded really good as well. I can definitely see myself enjoying this game.
Commander Jax on deck. Welcome to Crackdown 3.
Crackdown 3 was also at previous E3s, but didn't look too good. In fact, it actually looked pretty craphouse. This time, it looks like it's received a massive upgrade since the last time they showed it off. It kinda looks like Red Faction meets Saints Row. I like the look of the gameplay. It looks like the game will provide a lot of silly fun. The visuals they showed off looked great too. The character actually looks like Terry Crews, and to make matters better, it's voiced by him. I definitely see some significant improvements. I wasn't in the slightest bit interested before, but this time around they've showed off something that looks promising. Below, The visuals look stunning. I like the whole permanent death thing, but you play as a new character each time you die, and there's no tutorials or hand-holding. It just throws you into the game to figure things out. Normally, I'm not interested in that kind of thing, but you can attempt to find your previous character's corpse to get anything you lost back. Problem is, it's going to be very difficult to do that. It's a hack and slash dungeon crawler style game, so that helps pique my interest. And what interests me even more is the odd approach they've had to the visual design. The camera looks like it's very far away from the character, and this is intentional. It allows an emphasis on audio, something that you rarely see developers taking into account beyond making the special effects sound realistic. The co-founder and president, Nathan Vella, said during an interview that people with high-end systems and good sound systems will benefit from this. And this kind of had me a little surprised to see a developer talk about that sort of thing. It's put itself on my radar and I'm looking forward to trying it out. Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. I was surprised to see Activision are trying to make a comeback. This actually looks like the most interesting game they'll be publishing since 2007. I like the sound of an undead samurai, and I saw some stealth in the footage, so this gets me intrigued even more. The combat looks epic and fluid, and it's being developed by the same developers of Dark Souls, which would concern me, but this looks too good to pass up. Even if it's a Souls-like, I might give this one a try. Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom. It's open world, but that isn't entirely what hooked me here. It looks like a Metroidvania, and I only recently got hooked on this genre a few years ago. This looks quirky and silly, which I think will make the game really fun to play. I don't think it's doing anything majorly different, but it looks like an interesting title that I'd want to play. I feel like I could get pretty immersed in it, and I feel like the idea of being able to turn into different animals that allow you to traverse the environments in different ways is pretty cool. The art style and graphics look really good, the gameplay looks fun, so I definitely want to grab this one as soon as I can, and I might even grab this one on the Switch as well.
Hey, Billy? Can we maybe... how about we change the music up?
I can't actually. They only made one song for the DJ.
What does that mean?
I mean, yeah, sure thing. Just after this one's done.
After Party. This doesn't entirely look like the gameplay will be my cup of tea, but I like the concept of the narrative. You play as two best friends who find themselves recently deceased and spending an eternity in hell. And you have to outdrink Satan, so he'll allow you to return to Earth. I like the art style and I like the graphics a lot. I also like the unique camera style they've chosen. I've seen it used in movies before, if I recall correctly, but not often used in games. It looks like it's going to be a funny adventure game. I'm not a fan of point and clicks or that style of game, but I definitely want to give this one a try just for the narrative. The Forgotten City. If the stunning visuals and gameplay in the trailer don't surprise you, then maybe the fact that this game was originally a mod for Skyrim will. A popular one at that. And this will be a reimagining of it, basically stripping away the elements from The Elder Scrolls, allowing the game to be a proper standalone title. I'm really interested to see more gameplay and more information for this one.
Something's happening to me. For months now, I've been having these dreams.
Gears of War 5. I still haven't played the fourth one yet, but it looks like I'll need to catch up a little quick on this one. 5 doesn't look immensely impressive, but it looks good enough to be worth a playthrough. I actually love when any form of entertainment depicts stories across multiple generations of characters, so I'll probably find this one pretty interesting enough to keep me glued to the screen. Sable caught my eye the instant I saw the art style. It's probably the most intriguing I've seen this E3 and probably for a good while. It's a really odd art style. I don't think I've ever seen this style of animation in games before. It's apparently being made by a two-man team as well. I'm really hoping that I get to play and ride around on that hover bike though. It looks pretty cool.
I was born to fight wars that no army could win.
Just Cause 4 caught my eye because it's part of a franchise that I'm somewhat familiar with. I've played all 3 games but only finished 2 and 3. I enjoyed 3, but it felt like it had a lot of frustrations that I hope they fix in 4. I'm hoping to see some proper cover mechanics this time around. Number 3 felt a little too bullet hellish for my liking. This looks like it has some more varied biomes to explore too. The environmental destruction looks just as good as it did in the previous games, and apparently they've redone the handling for vehicles as well. Hopefully it's a significant improvement because I couldn't stand the driving in 3. I've always longed for an open-world detective game derived from a similar style to GTA. That was until LA Noire came along, and my hopes and dreams for a good detective game sunk. It was a little too much on the simulation side for my liking, it lacked action, and the open world felt like an extremely dull afterthought. After playing the detective sections in Assassin's Creed Syndicate, I saw that not all was completely lost. I actually liked how it was simple, but it still required some amount of thinking. It wasn't too much on the simulation side of things. Unlike LA Noire that couldn't quench your boredom if you were stuck on an island by yourself with absolutely nothing to do. If it isn't obvious by now, I'll point out that I really fucking hate LA Noire. But my hopes and dreams have arisen from the depths because of the sinking city. It's more of a fantasy side kinda title, but I'll take what I can get at this stage. Hopefully this one will have more to do in the open world. The gameplay I saw for it looked pretty promising, and the setting looks unique as well, so I'll be keeping an eye out for this one's release. Noida caught my eye because it heavily reminds me of Liero with its pixel art style and level destruction. The color variation in the visuals look great as well. Normally, pixel art styles are something I tend to avoid because it's rarely done well in a modern sense, but this actually looks like they've taken a modern day game and just had its visuals pixelized, if that makes any sense at all, which is probably what they did. I just like it, okay? That's all that matters, and that's why it caught my eye.
Asteroid on a collision course with Earth.
I still haven't played Rage 1, but I really want to, and Rage 2 looks pretty good from what I've seen in the footage they've shown off. The vehicular combat looked pretty damn awesome as well. The gunplay and on-foot combat looks very fluid. I really liked how he sort of blew some people into the air and then threw that boomerang? I'm an Aussie, how do I not know how to fucking say that? They threw a boomerang thing at them, and it just looked really cool. It looks like you can really make the battlefield your own, and I kinda like when first-person shooters do that. Wolfenstein Young Blood caught my eye as well. I know this is meant to be a co-op game, but Wolfenstein 2 made it on my list for 2017, for E3 2017, and I enjoyed it a lot. This time around, I have actually finished the previous titles, and I am planning on showcasing number 2 at some point in the near decade. I do think it's odd that they strayed from canon a bit because I thought BJ was meant to have boys, not girls, but I don't have much of an issue with this. Fortunately for me, I only heavily got invested in the franchise with the recent reboots. A Plague Tale: Innocence was also a title that was announced last year during a Sony presentation, if I recall correctly. The story revolves around two siblings fighting for survival during the darkest hours of history. It combines adventure, stealth, and action with a compelling story. And what makes this era and setting more interesting is that it also revolves around the Black Death. This means a common yet unexpected enemy in the game will be rats. We got to see some gameplay this E3, and I personally liked what I saw. One of the mechanics involves the usage of light. In the light, you're protected from the rats, but outside the light, you're not. And sometimes you may even have to use the rats against other humans who are a threat to you, like the Inquisition soldiers. And the game looks like it's not as focused on combat as much as it is on problem solving. It's a pretty interesting concept, and I'm eager to try it out. The only Elder Scrolls game I finished has been Skyrim, and I enjoyed it a lot, so I have faith that I'll enjoy the Elder Scrolls 6 a lot too. It's just unfortunate that we didn't get to see more footage at this year's E3, but I'm eager to see some more information and find out what they're going to change in this particular game as well.
How can a child save us all?
if he's sentenced to die?
I've been enjoying Assassin's Creed Origins, and I've been enjoying the Assassin's Creed franchise, period. So it's only natural that this title was going to end up on my list as well. Origins was great, and it felt like a breath of fresh air for the franchise. I'm really hoping that Assassin's Creed Odyssey can push the franchise further. This one is taking place in ancient Greek, which is a bit of an unexpected era for them to visit, but it'll be really interesting to see Ubisoft's iteration of it. This one looks like it's going to opt for some more RPG mechanics in its narrative as well, so I'm really hoping that this will allow for more variation in the story and the gameplay. Naval combat is also making a comeback, but it doesn't look anywhere near as good as it did in Black Flag. There was also footage for the Conquest battles, which showed a large-scale battle, and this kind of reminds me of Legends of Troy, but it actually looks a bit repetitive for a game coming out in 2018. I'm excited for Odyssey, but just not as excited as I was when Origins was announced. It looks like I'll need to dedicate the next month to finishing Origins though, because this one's coming out pretty soon. This one was announced before E3 2018, and I liked Sucker Punch's work on the Infamous franchise, so I was really intrigued to hear they were working on something new. From what I saw in the gameplay video, which was a meaty 8 minutes long, it looks amazing. The part where he does that stereotypical samurai finisher actually had me really hooked. The combat looks fast, it looks tactical and brutal, which are really nice combinations that I think will work really well with the samurai theme. Something that I really liked as well was the one-on-one combat they showed off. I actually think it was historically accurate for samurai to do this even on large battlefields, so I appreciate them trying to remain as historically accurate as possible. To make matters more interesting, apparently the already impressive footage that we saw was just a side mission. Control. In this one, I like how you can just throw random objects at people. The environmental destruction looks really good as well. This one is a supernatural action-adventure game where you have the ability to bend reality. And you play as Jesse, who's stuck in a struggle between some invaders known as the Hiss and a secret government agency called the Federal Bureau of Control, hence the name of the title, I guess. It's by the same developers of Quantum Break. I have yet to try that, even though I want to try it. It definitely looks like something I'd enjoy playing. Hitman 2. I boycott the most recent Hitman because they went with an episodic approach, and by the time they did the full release, I had pretty much forgotten about it. I am still interested in playing it though, and it's good to see that IO Interactive have found a publisher for 2. There was actually some concern in the community on whether the company would last or not after having been let go by Square Enix. This time around, Hitman 2 is being published by Warner Brothers, so the likelihood of me being able to showcase any footage for this is pretty much nil. That said, 2 looks about the same as the previous one, so why is it on my list? Well, I like stealth games, I like the Hitman franchise, that's pretty much all I have to say. But one thing I did notice is, in this, from the footage that I've seen, is that not every single bloody guard or enemy on the map is constantly suspicious of you. This was something that I kind of found annoying in Absolution and the previous games. I felt like the disguise system was a bit annoying and more of a hindrance at times. It looks like this one is a bit more lenient, or maybe it's the same. Either way, I'm eager to give it a go after I've played the previous one. And this Hitman also won't be episodic, which is a big plus for me. They seem to have... They mentioned that they found a compromise to give that additional content that they did with the first one, but also not have it in episodic releases. So that'll be really interesting to see how they pull off, and I'm glad that they found a compromise to suit both sides.
Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream.
Telltale's Walking Dead, the final season. I still have yet to play Season 2, but after Season 1 and 400 days, I kind of feel committed to the series now. Clem's really grown up a lot since Season 1. And I really like when games or TV shows have that continuity of a character growing up across games or seasons, especially if the original character has a child and that child becomes a new protagonist. Lee wasn't Clem's dad, but he was kinda like a foster dad to her in a sense, so it's kinda cool to have been playing as Lee and then in the next seasons to be playing as Clem. That really intrigues me, so I'm eager to catch up and play this one, even if it's eventually in the near future. I used to love playing Tony Hawk games. My favorite was American Wasteland, and to this day, I'm still waiting for a sequel, and I'm even waiting for an Underground 3. I never got into the Skate franchise, and I kind of missed out on it. It has been about 8 years since I've seen any skating game that's caught my eye. I actually knew about Session or Project Session before the E3 announcement, because I think PC Gamer did an article about it. And I was hooked because it seemed like it was trying to do something different and it was taking some elements from Tony Hawk's Project 8 and Proving Grounds. They also allowed you to use analog sticks on the controller to pull off some fancy tricks, which is pretty much the element that they're taking. I did try the demo for Session on their Kickstarter page. It wasn't bad, so I do like what they're trying to do, but the controls felt very counterintuitive, just for the sheer reason that you have to turn using the left and right trigger. This will take way too much time to get used to, and hopefully they allow you to remap it or change it in another demo or by release. Otherwise, I might actually have to give this one a miss, despite the fact it looks really fun. It really brought me back, very briefly, to the good old days. We'd just skate around the level, pulling off an inhumane number of combos while listening to some awesome music. So while I'm skeptical, it's definitely something I'm going to keep my eye on. Conqueror's Blade. I couldn't find much of a showcase for this one at E3. I saw a tiny morsel of footage in one of Xbox's indie developer showcases. I had to do some digging around to find out a bit more about it. In the footage shown, you can see some pretty large-scale medieval battles happening. As someone who enjoys Mount and Blade, I've been wanting something a bit fresher until Mount and Blade 3 comes along, that is, so this naturally caught my eye fairly easily. After digging around a bit, I found out that the game is a sandbox PC warfare game that's open world. It takes place across ancient Eastern and Western civilizations. The full-size map is 1,000 square kilometers and split up into 20 regions, all with land that the player can take control of. You can build infrastructures, recruit soldiers for your army, take over castles, and even form kingdoms. I think this is an MMO as well. I saw a lot of PvE gameplay for it, but there is PvP as well. I'm really hoping that the PvP is 100% optional, otherwise it might just ruin the experience for me or put me off altogether. From what I saw in the gameplay, the game looks unpolished, but the concept definitely has my attention. I'll be watching out for this one fairly carefully. Starfield. Not much is mentioned about this title yet, so it's with some skepticism that I'm placing this on the list. Why I'm placing it here though is because it's a space game being made by Bethesda, and that actually doesn't really help my skepticism, but despite their buggy games, or the fact that I've never finished a Fallout title, they do make good games. They've done medieval fantasy and post-apocalyptic games pretty well, hence why I'm really interested to see what they have to offer with a space game.
Your hunt for the convoy starts here, in your hideout, deep within the Chagos Islands.
Skull and Bones. Once again, this is a game that made it on my past E3 lists, and as I mentioned then, I'm not too fond of PvP games. However, I am very fond of the naval combat in Assassin's Creed Black Flag, so Skull and Bones still intrigues me a lot. We got to see some more gameplay this time around, and learnt a little more about the game, but I won't go into much detail for this one.
Close your eyes and imagine a place where the sun is bright and the beaches are white.
Man-Eater is an open-world game where you play as a shark. I mean, this pretty much sells itself. I don't really need to say much about it. It'll probably be really silly fun, and I'm on board with that. Star Citizen seems to be a fairly anticipated game as well, probably because it's been in development since 2011. It's an MMO that allows combat and space trading. This one only grabbed my attention a few years ago. It seems like a massive project and everything I've seen so far looks pretty good. Unfortunately, they haven't shown off much gameplay footage this E3, but I'm definitely eager to try this one out when it eventually releases.
Greetings, Commander. You have been sent to Quadrant Alpha 1. The mission is to find a new home for the crew on board of this ship.
Bar the enticing visuals from what I've seen of Genesis Alpha 1, in the video you can clone your own crew members with alien DNA to create the ideal crew, and I actually really like that idea a lot. It looks like the game will be simple enough for me to play, but I'll monitor it a bit more as more footage comes along and see how I feel about it from there. 2 Point Hospital is a game that I don't know if I would actually play. It's kind of hard to say. It doesn't help that it's being published by Sega, who seem to hate content creators. Business sims aren't entirely my cup of tea either. Ironically, I like them, but I usually get bored of them fast. This is probably because they just wear off on me because I run out of things to do, or maybe I'm not as good at them as I think I am, I don't really know. But this looks like a fun new take on Theme Hospital, which is no surprise because it's a spiritual successor. I'd probably give this one a go just for the quirky charm that it has alone. Ooblets looks like a really quirky game. It looks very family friendly as well. And sometimes I need to appease to my childish side with some childish games, and this looks like the perfect game to do that. The visuals look simple but vibrant. I saw some decent gameplay footage as well. The game looks just as open as you'd expect. It looks like Pokemon meets The Sims, at least to me it does. So I'll probably end up giving this one a go.
Hey, what's up everybody? I'm Bathtub Guy, and we're here at E3 to take some looks at this new game I'm going to show you right now.
Trover Saves the Universe looked super intriguing and funny. It had some decent gameplay and visuals, and the environment they showed in the gameplay reminded me a lot of Adventure Time. And apparently this one is about your dogs being dognapped by a lunatic who stuck them into his eye holes and is using their life essence to destroy the universe. I can't say that with a straight face. So it sounds about as weird as it looks really, and I'm definitely going to be giving this one a shot when I can. I don't often find mech games that interest me, not since the old Mech Warrior games. Sometimes I stumble across one, but they're either crap or look overcomplicated for me, but Daemon X Machina looks like it will be simple enough that I can enjoy it. The story concept doesn't sound too interesting, but the gameplay is what caught my eye, and it looks really good. This title is a very welcome remake announcement. Spyro Reignited Trilogy. I only ever really tried the older Spyro games when I was little. I couldn't really get into them because back then I was extremely bad at puzzle solving and figuring games out. I always found myself getting stuck in those games and never went to revisit them since the PS1 era died off. I'm eager to play through Spyro Reignited Trilogy, as long as it doesn't frustrate me like the Crash Bandicoot remake because it's being made by the same developers. I remember being able to charge around the starting levels and seeing how much momentum I could build up, and I just had a lot of fun messing around with that. I like that they kept the cartoony art style, which is pretty much a given. I guess no one would have expected that they wouldn't. And the graphics look amazing as well. Really excited for this one. Pokemon Let's Go. I remember growing up, I've always wanted to get into Pokemon games, but I could only ever play them on other people's Game Boys because my folks couldn't afford to get me one. So unfortunately, I never really fully got into them. And as time went on, I very rarely saw any changes to the franchise that interested me. I was actually going to grab a DS or a 3DS for one of the latest Pokemon RPGs, but they had no gym battles, so that was a little off-putting for me. That might change though, because for this generation of consoles, I actually have a Nintendo console, and that still feels surreal to say for a few reasons. That said, the Switch is finally getting a Pokemon RPG game. I'm both excited and a little bit disappointed. I'm excited because I'll be able to finally own a copy of a Pokemon RPG and maybe even actually finish it. Gym battles will also be making a return in this one. But I'm disappointed because apparently this Pokemon game won't have wild battles. And that pisses me off because I remember having a lot of fun running through grass fields and caves in the older games. This was all in the favor of finding wild Pokemon that I could catch. I feel like removing wild battles kind of removes a big aspect of Pokemon just in general. Just imagine watching the TV show where they didn't encounter wild Pokemon. It would just be a little bit crap, I reckon. Whether I get into this particular game or not will actually depend on how desperate I am to play something on my Switch. I still haven't played Unravel 1, but I have bought it. And what captured my attention originally was the visuals, and it looked like an interesting little indie game that I'd want to play. Naturally, Unravel 2 looks like it has the same charm that grabbed my attention with the first. It has co-op, but also allows you to play solo, and what intrigues me even more is how you can control both characters at different times. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons. I'm definitely going to be grabbing this one when I can. I think the game actually already did come out, but I still need to play the first one before I can get around to the second. Normally, if I see an interesting game and it's followed by a VR logo, I pretty much just lose interest, and I lose interest pretty damn fast. I do try not to be biased when I can though. I just don't entirely like the idea of having a screen attached to my face to play a game, and I just don't know if I could really get into them. This is where Stormland comes in. It looks pretty damn good. Honestly, the most intriguing VR game I've seen yet. And for that, it wouldn't feel right if I didn't put this on my list. I like how fluid the combat looks, and what I really liked was actually the part where the player was able to bring up a shield with one arm and then fire with the other hand. It just looked really kind of cool. It's open world to boot, and it just looked awesome. I liked what I saw in that. However, this is actually on my list more for those of you watching than it is for me, so if you want to know of any interesting VR games, Stormland is one of them. So these next few games are pretty much games that were on my previous eye-catching games at E3, and this next one is Days Gone. I'm not going to go into too much detail for it, but it's on my list again because we got to see some more gameplay this time, and each time I see more gameplay, I'm more and more sold on the game. Anthem, once again a title on my previous E3 list, I think E3 2017. We got to see some pretty decent gameplay this time around. The game does look promising. It looks good visually, but also looks fairly fluid. It's kind of like an Iron Man simulator. Seriously, someone needs to take a bloody moment to make a bloody open world Iron Man game because we really need one. I think this needs to be looked at as a bit of an MMO light as well to avoid any skewed expectations. I'm interested enough that I'll try it out, but I just don't know when I will. Metro Exodus was on my list for E3 2017, and the new footage finally gives us a look at some proper gameplay. Between the last E3 and now, I've played the previous two games as well, and I'm glad I did because they were fucking amazing. And this one is going to be open world, well, a lot more open world, so it will be more reminiscent of Stalker. They're trying to avoid typical fetch quests as well, so it'll be interesting to see how they do this. I like the look of the gun customization as well. That kind of reminds me of Crysis 3. It looks quick and easy to use, and there's some really good looking stealth mechanics, so naturally open world plus stealth means I'm pretty much sold. I'm definitely really excited for Metro Exodus. Beyond Good and Evil 2 is on my list again because the cinematic trailer this time around was amazing, just as much as the first one really. I've been keeping a close eye on this because it looks like it's going to be one of Ubisoft's largest projects yet, and it even looks like it'll be one of their most unique games yet. This time, we got to see a lot more gameplay, some of which was stuff they did show before E3, and I'm glad we got to see more, and the more gameplay I see, the more solidified my excitement gets. On a side note, I actually think that Ubisoft might want to consider getting into animation. I could literally watch a TV show or a movie just made with the same level of quality that they make these trailers with. Marvel's Spider-Man. This is another game that was on my eye catchers for previous E3s, and rightfully so. We got to see some meaty chunks of gameplay videos for this one in more open environments. Everything looks so fluid that it's genuinely hard for me to believe that it's actual gameplay. I've played a lot of Spider-Man games and I've actually enjoyed them all. This looks nothing like the other Spider-Man games. Spider-Man is known for being agile and it's often shown off in the movies. So far, that was only somewhat replicated in the web swinging mechanics in the previous games, and even then, they were still somewhat limited. This looks like Spider-Man has a lot more freedom of movement, and even looks pretty damn closely, if not better, than the movies. This will probably be the best Spider-Man game yet, or at least I hope it will be. It definitely looks like it has the potential. Even if it isn't, I'll probably enjoy this as much as I enjoyed the previous ones, so I'm really excited for this one. Ori and the Will of the Wisps, again on my previous eye-catching games at E3. This time around, though, I have played Ori and the Blind Forest. I absolutely loved it, and I have no doubts that I'll feel the same about Will of the Wisps. Ashen was another game that was featured in my previous eye-catches, I think E3 2017. This time around, once again, we get to see some meaty gameplay videos for it. We're learning that it's an action RPG set in a big open world. It's got stamina-based combat for high-risk, high-reward-driven combat. There's passive multiplayer, so you might encounter other players who you can group up with, which is kind of nice, but the concept behind how they're doing multiplayer is the most intriguing. Players can actually be spawned in as the NPC quest givers, to sort of give you that feeling that the quest giver is actually helping you with the quest. Hopefully it's not always online DRM though. I'm actually glad that they're not putting in PvP, which I hope they don't decide that they want to. But I'm not going to go into too much detail for this since it was featured before. You can check out the previous videos for that. That said, I'm even more interested for this title than before. That is all I have on my lists for this year's E3. Once again, if you saw games that caught your eye at this year's E3, then let me know what they were in the comments below. Even if some of them weren't on this list, just let me know. There will be gameplay or trailer links to each game in the description as well. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my channel for more videos. If you enjoyed this particular video, let me know in the comments below. It helps me out. It's a really long one, so thank you so much for watching. And as usual, ladies and gentlemen, I will see you in the next video.